The Honourable Member for Okanagan-Coquihalla.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise today to speak on Bill C-478. I would like to begin by recognizing the member from Selkirk-Interlake for his considerable efforts in bringing this important bill forward. I would also like to share with all the members of this place why Bill C-478 is of great importance to the citizens of Okanagan-Coquihalla. As some members may well know, West Bank, sometimes referred to as West Kelowna, is a community in the heart of my riding. Many years ago, a local West Bank family set off to the backcountry for a scenic family camping trip. Proud grandparents George and Edith Bentley, their daughter Jackie, and her husband Bob Johnson, along with their daughters Janet, who was 13 at the time, and her 11-year-old sister Karen. The destination was scenic Wells Gray Provincial Park for a 2-week camping adventure. You can imagine how close and tight-knit this family was in planning for 2 weeks together, enjoying all of life's special moments that it brings to us. A little over 2 weeks, Mr. Speaker, a little over 2 weeks later, Bob Johnson failed to show up to work. This would be the first time in over 20 years that Bob Johnson missed a day at work. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to apologize to the House in advance. The details that I am going to be sharing next are unpleasant. They are vile. They are disturbing. But I believe it's necessary, for it is precisely these situations that speak to the necessity and the importance of Bill C-478. After the Johnson-Bentley family had disappeared, a large-scale search and rescue operation was led by the RCMP. If ever there was a reminder of the challenging and difficult work that RCMP members perform, one cannot fathom the shock and horror after a month of searching, finally locating the family vehicle of Bob Johnson. Inside the car were the burned bodies of Bob, his wife Jackie, and her parents George and Edith. Sadly, it did not end there. Located inside the trunk were the burned bodies of the grandchildren, 13-year-old Janet and her 11-year-old sister Karen. All had been executed, murdered, shot in the head by a .22 caliber bullet. But it didn't end there. RCMP later learned that the monster responsible had first killed the 4 adults and then abducted the 2 granddaughters. For 6 days, this monster did unspeakable things to the girls before finally murdering them and burning them in the Johnson family car with the parents and grandparents. Truly one of the most horrific and disturbing acts imaginable. In 2008, the monster responsible for these heinous acts, David Shearing, applied for parole. Only now he goes by a different name, Mr. Speaker. His name is David Ennis. Assumedly so that if he obtains parole, he can more easily disappear to an unsuspecting public. When citizens in West Bank learned of this parole application, they were shocked, terrified, and angry. They were again being victimized by the senseless murder that took away their family, their friends, co-workers, and neighbors. They took action, and soon a petition with over 9,000 names was sent to the parole board opposing parole for this monster. Mr. Speaker, I was elected in 2011, and to this very day, I hear from citizens in Logan Lake, West Bank, in Merritt, that they are fearful of this monster, that he will be paroled and will return to the region where he once lived and committed these disturbing acts that took so many innocent victims. And that, Mr. Speaker, is why I am here today speaking in strong support of Bill C-478 on behalf of the family, on behalf of their friends and co-workers who went through the parole process and are forced to revisit this tragedy far too frequently. Now, Mr. Speaker, I apologize for sharing these details with the House. However, all too often, when we talk about bills like C-478, I find that the victims are often neglected, if not forgotten. In fact, I have reviewed close to 20 different media stories on Bill C-478, and not one of them mentioned David Shearing, who now goes by David Ennis. But murdering monsters like David Shearing are certainly not alone. Paul Bernardo, Robert Picton, Russell Williams, Clifford Olson are other examples who have taken lives and continue to haunt the victims through the parole process. I submit that this is wrong and that Bill C-478 is a needed and necessary step to end the ongoing suffering of victims that cannot and should not be allowed to continue to occur. I believe it's also important, Mr. Speaker, that we recognize what Bill C-478 ultimately proposes to do. Bill C-478 does not guarantee a 40-year sentence, as some media stories have suggested. This bill is specific on applying to those individuals who have committed the most serious of combined crimes that include abduction, sexual assault, and murder. This bill does not propose minimum sentences for those who have committed these disturbing acts, but rather it provides new tools for judges in sentencing. I believe it's also important to recognize that research has indicated that individuals who commit these most serious of crimes have yet to be successful in being paroled. Some would ask, why should there be a change of the parole eligibility if the most serious of criminals, in fact, are not successful being paroled? Well, the answer from the citizens of Okanagan-Coquihalla is, please stop this ongoing parole process that re-victimizes innocent friends, family, and neighbors and causes citizens to live in fear. Bill C-478 creates legal tools that will allow judges the discretion to do precisely that. And that's why I encourage all members of this House to vote in support of it. Before I close, Mr. Speaker, I would like to share a few thoughts further with my honorable colleagues. In 2011, a life was tragically taken in a senseless and brutal act of domestic violence in my riding. The family now wears a tattoo of a dragonfly in memory of their lost loved one as they seek justice for this tragedy. A tattoo, much like the scars of loss through victimization, is something that lasts a lifetime. My final point I would like to share stems from last September. For it was in last September of last year that a parole hearing was held in Bowden, Alberta for David Shearing. Even some 30 years after this horrific event occurred, over 24 friends and family members of the Johnson and Bentley families were forced to travel a great distance to appear at a parole hearing to relive this brutal act of unspeakable tragedy. Let's all take a moment to reflect on that. At a time of year when children and families are excitedly getting ready for a new year of school, the Johnson and Bentley families are forced on a journey of great distance only to arrive in time to relive a life-altering tragedy and face the monster who forever destroyed their family. How many times should the Johnson and Bentley families be forced to make this journey and relive this horror? Mr. Speaker, it shouldn't have to be this way. No family should be forced to endure what has happened to the Johnsons and the Bentleys and continues to occur as they relive this horrific event over and over at parole hearings. In closing, I'd like to thank the members of the House for taking the time to listen to the concerns of my constituents. This is not a subject or speech I take any pleasure in sharing with you, But there are times where we as parliamentarians have an opportunity to speak out on the matters that of great concern to the citizens we represent. And this is certainly important to my riding. Let us never forget the victims, Mr. Speaker. I ask that all members of this House support victims of very serious crimes by voting in favor of Bill C-478. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.